Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about inking comics. If you haven't already looked at the video that I did about setting up, thumbnailing, and penciling for comics, go ahead and check out that playlist and then come back to this because we're going to be jumping right in where those videos lead up. When I first started inking this comic, I was using the panel folders in CSP and leaving all of my panels as separate folders so that I could access them like that, and that turned out to be not the most efficient way to do things. Even though it's got this really nice, you can see kind of like the purple border around the page that lets you know where the mask is, so you can't really write outside of that area when you're in the panel. I prefer to just do it with selection because it's a lot easier to have it all on one layer when it comes to the rest of the work that needs to be done, coloring, doing highlights, doing shadow, and stuff like that. So I set up the panels using the Clip Studio panel tools, and then I basically just combine that all into one layer, and then I leave the panel borders separate from the inking, but I set them as a referred layer so that I can use a referred selection tool to select inside the frame and then ink on a different layer below that. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a little convoluted. I'll endeavor to show you guys what I mean with the little layer panel on the side here as we go along. To rasterize the folder that has these panels in it, we're going to go ahead and right click on it, and then we're just going to go to rasterize. That's going to make a new layer above that's a normal layer, and then we can go ahead and delete the panel folder that contained those outlines, and it will give us basically just like the shapes of the panel borders, but as a normal layer. And then make sure that I have the pencils where I want them. And then I'm going to make a new layer, go back to my panel border layer, and hit this little lighthouse icon to make it a referred layer. I prefer to ink with my pencils at 50%. It works really well for me because of the blue and the red that I tend to pencil in. If you're penciling in something darker, more towards the bottom of the color wheel, you might need to go a little bit lighter than 50% just to get it so you can see really easily which lines have been inked and which haven't. Now we're going to go ahead and set up the selection tool that I use to select within the panels. I also use this when I am coloring. This is something that I learned from Color with Kurt here on YouTube. Very cool channel, very interesting comic process. It gave me a lot of different efficiencies that I really appreciate and use a lot. So first thing you're going to do is go find the auto select tool in your tools menu, and then you're going to select selection for referred layers. It's a little tool underneath the auto select. The critical settings here are the selection mode. You can see it's doing whatever this little, the box that's just selected in the middle, it looks like a rectangular Venn diagram. Apply to connected pixels only. Close gap is at 2. That's just my preference. You can kind of move this around as you need it. I have area scaling off, and then refer multiple is set to just the reference icon. I have this little subtool set up like this and saved off to the side in my quick access folders so that when I'm using the tools in there, I can click on this really quickly and know exactly what I'm using. The purpose of this tool is so that I don't have to leave the inking layer and I can switch to a different panel. So you can click within a panel, deselect, and then click within a different panel without having to change layers a bunch of times. It doesn't seem like it's a ton, but if you are doing a whole page of comics or an entire comic book, it could save you thousands of different clicks. I also have buttons set up to view the little marching ants and to view this little panel that shows up at the bottom. This has a bunch of selection options, I guess is what I would call those. I don't always need to see this when I'm inking, and I don't always need to see the running ants. So I set up little buttons to turn those off. To get rid of those, you're going to go to View Selection Border and View Selection Launcher. If you are looking to set those up in a quick access menu like this, I've got a video on my workstation that teaches you how to set up things in the little quick access bar, and there's directions in there on how to set those up. If keyboard shortcuts is more your vibe, you can set them up as those as well. Now you can see as I've got the panel selected, I can right inside the panel, but not outside the panel. When I deselect it, I can write anywhere on the page. For my comics currently, I'm using a brush called MC Comic Inker that is available on my Patreon at the $1 tier. There will be a link in the description below if you want to try that out for yourself. The style with which you ink is going to be totally up to your personal preference. Some people like a little bit thinner lines like you would see in a manga. Some people like a little bit more dynamics to the line like you're seeing here. There's a lot of little tiny wispy bits, but there's also some kind of thick chunky areas as well. I prefer a brush that's going to give me a variable line. I like to have a lot of different feeling to the lines, and I like that I can get that with one brush without having to kind of go back and redo areas or thicken areas within my line art. If you're wondering about the techniques that I use to ink things, I did a video just before this one on my channel that has some inking techniques that I use, including I will undo a line and redraw it as many times as I need to. I also will erase sections of line and just sort of finesse those areas. I also use the transparent version of the same brush a lot in Clip Studio Paint to fix things that I feel like weren't quite there. I like that it gives the same texture and the same tip to the lines without having to use like a separate eraser or set up a separate eraser for every brush. I think that that's a really valuable thing to have. You can see from this demo, I do zoom in and out quite a bit. I try to keep it around 100% so that I know I'm getting it at the size that like will logically be seen on paper. I do sometimes zoom in a lot more than that though, which is a terrible habit that you shouldn't do, but I definitely do it anyway. What you want to avoid is getting a bunch of detail in your panels that you're not even going to be able to see in print. So when things come from a high definition computer screen into a printed document, they sometimes can lose a little bit of the really nice, like crisp detail if it's really, really small because the resolution just changes. There's only so much that a printer can do. Sometimes when I'm inking things or I open up a comic page after a long time, I will come across a panel or an area of a panel that I feel like wasn't defined well enough in the pencils, and I'll need to come back and add a secondary pencil or sketch layer on top of that. Don't be afraid to do that, and don't be afraid to come back and redraw or repencil or even re-thumbnail whole panels or whole pages if you need to get like the best results that you can from your ink. There's definitely something to be said in a production environment for not reworking things. However, if you are on your own time scale or you're doing this for a webcomic and you have a little bit of extra time and you feel like you could do better now, I would recommend that you do it just so that you are happier with the finished result. If you are on a deadline or something, maybe best to just kind of ink it as it stands. I've worked on this comic over the past, I think like 6 months. And in that time, I have been working on other projects. I've been working on client stuff. I've been working on YouTube videos and other illustrations and things, and working on learning a bunch of expanded skills. When I came back to the comic I'm getting ready to publish this year, a lot of the pencils just weren't hacking it. And I am definitely choosing to go back because I'm not on a deadline and fix the panels that I feel like I could do better on now. Sometimes it's just as easy as I feel like I could do a better hand than I originally drew, even in the inks, when I come back in color. So I'll kind of pick those out, erase the areas that I feel like are yucky compared to my current skill level, and sort of get those done a little bit better. At the end of this video, I'm gonna do an inking test demo to kind of show you guys how I came up with the brush that I'm currently using. You can use any brush that you feel comfortable with. In fact, I would recommend your most comfortable brush for inking. I definitely had some brushes that I felt like would have been good inkers, but they took forever to get line art done with. And so I didn't choose those because I wanted something that was a little quicker. A good way to do that would be to draw a little character in pencils and then just copy and paste it a bunch of times into a big sheet and ink it once with every brush that you're thinking about. That will give you kind of like a final list, and then you can come back and kind of play with each of the finals and see what you like the best. You can also see in this demo that I am hand drawing the onomatopoeia, the little noises that are seen in the comic panel. You don't have to do that. There's plenty of good fonts to do that. The way that I've done it in this panel is I did it on a separate layer. I lettered it in black the way that I wanted it, switched it to white, and then added a layer outline to it using the technique that I showed you guys in a previous video that I will put in the cards. In this ink test, I wanted to show you guys some of the stock Clip Studio brushes that I thought about using for the comic. This one is the CSP G pen. I really liked the thick to thin it had. I liked that you could get lines that looked the same all the way from one end to the other by using the hardest pen pressure. This one is the Clip Studio Textured Pen. This one I like because it's kind of like the G pen. It's a little thinner on the ends, and then it has sort of a gritty feeling to it. It feels like it's being put down on actual paper rather than a super slick, clean digital surface. I do really like this. I didn't end up going with this one, but this one was definitely a contender. I like that you can get a little crunchier lines with this. It feels a little bit more like it was inked traditionally when you look at it. I think one of the problems with this one was I just didn't love the final look of it, which I could have probably worked on. I did like these very tiny little hairs you could get though. This one is the Clip Studio Turnip Pen. This one's cool because it has a very like felt tip Sakura micron pen feeling to it, but just like a little chunkier. If you made it a smaller size, obviously it wouldn't be this thick. I'm not quite as comfortable with this one because it does have a thickness to the ends of the lines that I'm not really used to. So I didn't end up going with this one because I was having some speed issues and I didn't really love the lines, like the ends of the lines looked kind of weird to me. But it is a very good kind of like markery looking pen. This one is called the Mameo Pen. I found this one in the Clip Studio store for free. It has a very cool look to it, but this was one of the ones that I had to get rid of from the selection set because it just takes so long to get that look to things. If you really, really have to have that, go for it. It was taking me like almost 3 times as long to ink with it though, so I kind of abandoned even this little test. This one is the Clip Studio Brush Pen. I found this one in the paintbrush tools. Sometimes they don't always put things where they're meant to be used in Clip Studio, and that's okay. You can move them around if you'd like to. This one has sort of a feeling like the textured pen, but a little bit more like a paintbrush. It's just even crispier than that other one, and it has some really interesting, more traditional looking even than the textured pen. You can see kind of on the ends, you'll get like a brush flip texture sometimes. It looks really cool, and I really like the look of this. I think I want to do some more illustrations with this pen. This wasn't one of the ones that I chose for the comic though, because it wasn't super familiar to me, and I didn't really have the time to get familiar with it. So you can see when I actually draw in these little legs, the texture looks so cool though. I need to use this pen more. It looks very much like you inked this little piece with a brush rather than digital. Dang, those little lines, like when you get really fast strokes going, it has some really interesting little textures that show up in the randomizer. This is the classic brush pen from True Grit Texture Supply. These are some of my favorite pens. I bought an ink kit from them called Rusty Nib that is incredible. I'm gonna put that in the description. It's not sponsored. I bought this kit for myself. It was something that I really wanted. I just think they're professional, well put together brushes, and they have them for Clip Studio now, which is incredible. This one was a very fast inker. I really liked the texture to it. It's pretty light, but it's nice. it's not super obtrusive, like it doesn't get in your way. Also, the end of line flicks were really, really clean. There's sort of a weird blob thing that happens when I'm making like new brushes. I'll end up with a taper that's not quite clean enough and doesn't have a very nice end to it like that. Drives me crazy. But this one has very nice line quality, texture, and the end tapers are really super cool. This is one of my favorites from that same Rusty nib pack called Fountain Pen. It's a very, very fun inker. I use this all the time in illustration. It has the wispiest ends that I've ever seen in my life. They're so beautiful, and it feels so much like a real fountain pen to use it. I love it. And you can get these big, scratchy, giant swipes like under the eye. I don't know. This pen is so fun to use. This one I did not have when I was originally testing, but I probably would have thought about using this one with the comic. It would have been on my finalist list. So this is the one I'm actually using for the comic, the MC Comic inker. That's a custom brush that I made. It has a few eccentricities. You can see like the starting line on that one cheek didn't quite taper fully out, which doesn't drive me nuts. It's fine. I don't mind it. Plus I'm so familiar with this brush now that it doesn't even really matter. I find that I can ink incredibly quickly with this brush, and I'm almost always happy with the results as well. When I don't know what to use, or I'm in a hurry, or I'm doing something that I need to have a very like marina look to it, I will do this brush. If you find that you're really close on a brush, but it's not quite doing what you want it to, don't be afraid to duplicate that brush and make some edits to it just to see if you can tweak it to be your best brush life. That's what I end up doing basically on every brush that I use. I almost never use brushes just stock out of the box except for these True Grit ones. For some reason, I'm not finding that I need to do a bunch of like edits and weird crap to those. Mostly those are just, I use them how I get them. And that's pretty much it for comic inking. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer those. If you're looking for more content like this, please go check out that comic making playlist. I also have a playlist of some old comic making live streams that are really fun to watch if you're looking for something that's just sort of a chat and chill, and if you're looking for something that's more in real time. You can support this channel by liking and commenting on this video and by subscribing here on YouTube. If you'd like to do even a little bit more than that to support my projects and this channel's growth, you can subscribe over on Patreon. This video is brought to you by my amazing patrons, Jesse C., Anthony Jutz, Terror Billy Jean, Tuna, and Theo. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support all of the projects that I'm working on and all of the wonderful things that I have planned for this year and the future. I appreciate you so much.